All right, so let's get started. I would like to invite some of the panelists who are here on the venue in person, and keeping in nature the complicated problem that palm leaf manuscripts is, some of the panelists are online. So we will try to see how we coordinate and make this work. So for the panelists who are online, I would request them to please unmute when you would like to speak, and go ahead and do so. So first of all, I would like to invite the panelists who are here. And before that, a brief introduction about myself. I'm Ravi Kiran. I'm a faculty at the Center for Visual Information Technology at IIIT Hyderabad. And my areas of research are AI-based approaches for historical and modern document image understanding, and in general, deep learning for multimodal multimedia. Next, I will introduce the panelists one by one. So Dr. P. Ramanujan is ex-director, Language Computing Group at Center for Development of Advanced Computing, CDAC, Bangalore, India. So he has developed a special purpose computer-based manuscript editor, and he has presented a software called Desika, a natural language understanding system at Parliament Annex in New Delhi. Next, Dr. Mukul Sinha, who is here in person. So I would like to invite him to please occupy the chairs here. So he's a director at Expert Software Consultants Private Limited. And he's a committee member, technology development in Indian languages, Government of India. He's also the chairman, project review and steering group on long-term digital preservation and Northeast Cultural Heritage Project. He also happens to be a mentor for eBhasha Setu, which is a startup in AI-assisted natural language processing. Next, Dr. Christopher, whom we all know as a keynote speaker from today, please. So he's the founder, CEO, and AI expert at Techlia, a French AI software company focused on document processing solutions. He has 20 years of experience in machine learning, both in the academia and industry. He has several papers in reputed journals and conferences, and has received several awards in handwriting recognition. Next, Dr. Alvar is assistant professor, Nyaya Shastra, and professor in charge at Government Maharaja Sanskrit College, Mysore, India. He is also honorable project director, Transdisciplinary University, and Foundation for Revitalization of Local Health Traditions in Bangalore. And he's also an approved guide for MPhil and PhD of the Karnataka Sanskrit University. Online panelist, Dr. G.P. Prasad is an assistant director in charge, Ayurveda, and is scientist 4 at National Institute of Indian Medical Heritage, Hyderabad. And he is the co-investigator for a descriptive catalog of collection and digitization of medical manuscripts. So for the uninitiated, or for those who are hearing this word for the first time, so these are palm leaf manuscripts, and these are sourced from various collections across the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. So what you see on the screen are manuscripts from in different languages of India, and the one in the bottom right is one from Bali. So one look at them, and you begin to understand a couple of things instantly. One is their highly unstructured nature, the variety, both in terms of size, form factor, scripts, languages, and also the mixed nature of these kinds of documents. So just a brief background about how these manuscripts were made. So this was a technology for documentation, which lasted up to the early part of 20th century before the machines took over. So the name comes from the tree you see in top left, which is a palm tree, which is widespread and extant in large parts of Asia. So these leaves are taken, and the leaf is then cut into small strips. These strips are then boiled in water or a concoction consisting of herbs, and then a hole is punched into the dried strips so that you can thread through them and you can perform some kind of a binding. And then a metallic engraver is taken to engrave or etch the writing on these leaves. And subsequently, some ink is added to these leaves to get what we call palm leaf manuscripts. And one of our panelists has actually brought some palm leaves. So perhaps you can show the audience as well as those seated here. So what Dr. Alvar is showing you are palm leaves. This is how they look like. And if you see, you can see the binding hole that goes through these leaves. Of course, we are here at a conference which seeks to understand them digitally. So naturally, there is a process of digitization which is involved, and ranging from a simple photograph to more elaborate setups. There is a large range of techniques by which these palm leaves are digitized. And as I mentioned before, there is tremendous variety in these documents. So they come in varying image sizes, varying image quality, and these exhibit degradations, variations in scanning, illumination. There are intra and inter-language variations, layout variations. And it is this spectrum that needs to be tackled when we say technologies and systems for palm leaf manuscripts. Okay, so now coming to the aims and scope of this panel discussion, we will examine this topic and engage in a discussion roughly on 4 lines or 4 themes. So the first is to examine the motivation for studying Indic manuscripts, other than as a technology problem. What is the larger motivation for studying these manuscripts? The other is to examine the challenges in digitization and transcription of these manuscripts. The third is to look at what are the challenges in machine-based understanding of these manuscripts. And the fourth is to go beyond making isolated machine-based solutions towards systems. Right? How do you tackle these challenges and build practical systems for understanding these manuscripts? So for each of these topics, I'm going to start with a preamble, something that sets the stage for the discussion. And then we will go to each of the panel members in a rather free-flowing organic manner. And then we will just go forth with the discussion. And in the interest of time, I may restrict some of the comments. So please bear with that. Motivation. So there are 2 large movements which are taking center stage across the world. One is yoga, and the other is holistic natural treatment, also known locally as Ayurveda. So these 2 large lifestyle choices in a large part can trace their origins to prescriptions and guidelines which have been preserved as these palm leaf manuscripts. But apart from these 2 topics, palm leaf manuscripts cover a large number of subject areas such as wellness, aesthetics, humanities, and ecology. And of course, given the diversity of these topics, they are of interest to multiple communities: religious and cultural studies, archaeologists, sociologists, historians, linguists, art, and specific to computer science, they are of interest to researchers in computer vision and natural language processing and information retrieval, of course. So another way to think about these topics is in terms of the stages involved before the machines intervene. And we will not spend too much time on how the documents are sourced, just so that we can stay on topic. But it's important to understand that the documents have to come from somewhere. They are not born out of thin air. And therefore, these are often private collections with individuals, or they may be housed in institutions, different kinds of libraries or cultural centers. And as with any field, there are domain experts who know where to find them and what to do with them. So if we look at the challenges in digitization and transcription, so I hope this picture makes it clear. So it is the burden of the person on the right who is trying to understand and decipher the manuscripts that we wish to address. Right? How can we reduce or alleviate this manual process of understanding these manuscripts and making sense of them? Now, naturally, the question is how to choose. How do you choose what to digitize? So by a conservative estimate, there are at least 30 million manuscripts which await this process. And this is a picture from one such manuscript collection center or library. This is from Chennai, India. And there are many such scattered across different parts of the country. So the National Mission for Manuscripts, which comes under the Ministry of Culture in Government of India, has taken up this mission. And they have digitized these manuscripts. These manuscripts cover many of the languages that are extant in the country. And as I mentioned, there is a interplay of scripts and languages, given that what you see is what you write and what you read nature of Indic scripts. And these are some of the languages. So Sanskrit, Hindi, Tamil, Malayalam, and interestingly, there are also manuscripts related to Persian and Arabic, likely due to the migrations and cultural exchanges that happened. So the manuscript center has also identified different kinds of problems that arise in these manuscripts. So when they are being archived, so some of them are bad, brittle, some of them are infected by fungus because these are leaves, organic material, and subject to vagaries of nature. Worm eaten, worms eat leaves, so no surprise. And they don't make a distinction between regular leaves and palm leaves. It's just a leaf. Some of them are broken because of the delicate nature of the material. Some of them are subject to damage due to the processes that were applied on them in an attempt to preserve, sadly. So with this, I would like to pause, and I would like to start with Dr. Alvar and ask him to present a couple of starting comments on the motivation for studying these manuscripts, and also what are the various steps that are associated before we can even begin to study these manuscripts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ravi Kiran. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think you can be seated.
So in India, these
Yes.
So thank you very much for a very comprehensive introduction about manuscripts. So in India, we have 145 institutional repositories that are recognized by the government, and more than about 500 personal collections of manuscripts, palm leaf manuscripts. And in fact, when Dr. Ravikiran was mentioning, he mentioned only two areas, namely Ayurveda and yoga. In fact, we have catalogued 8,500 manuscripts on 40 different fields of science and technology, as varied as alchemy, mathematics, astronomy, shipbuilding, military science, and several other exotic topics, many of which are of great contemporary relevance. I'll just give 2 or 3 examples. For example, in India, you have millions of what we call as these inscriptions, which are actually engraved on stone. And when you see these inscriptions, you find that they are not carved with a chisel or something like some instrument. They are actually written on stone. So I recently came across a manuscript where it was mentioning several herbal solutions that can be applied to a stone. The stone, which is so hard in surface, it will become soft, and you can write on it, and once again it will become hard. So this is a very unique solution that only Indians had access to, where they could write on stone. And when you see all the millions of inscriptions that are available in India, we see that a particular when the solution is given in the palm leaf manuscript, it is not being deciphered as it. Similarly, for example, we have palm leaf manuscripts on alchemy, and we have now documented it in the form of a book where they mention about 70 different methods to convert base metal to gold. So this is a very unique solution: base metal to gold, base metal to silver, and several other metals. In fact, Indians were in the forefront of metallurgy because India was one of the first countries to manufacture metals in the entire world. And I will just give one more example. So Sushruta is the sage Sushruta who lived more than 2000 years ago. He is supposed to be the father of plastic surgery. And I understand that the person, American scientist who found out plastic surgery, has referred to Sushruta being the inspiration behind plastic surgery. And in those days, the king who was presiding over the kingdom used to give a very unique and very peculiar punishment to persons who committed a particular crime. So he used to cut off their noses. And as soon as their noses were cut, they used to go to Sushruta to get the plastic surgery done. And it is mentioned that Sushruta used to extract small layers of skin and do the plastic surgery. So if he had to do such subtle extraction of the skin, you can understand the subtle nature of the metals that he used. And today metals are supposed to be they are poisonous, etc. But they had the techniques to treat these metals so that it doesn't become aseptic or whatever you call it in medical terms. So several new innovations can be done based on the information available in the manuscripts. So it's very important for us to conserve, preserve, and also then extract the information that is available in the manuscript, for which we call it as a life cycle of manuscripts. So Mr. Ravikiran was just mentioning which are the most important manuscripts that need to be digitized. So we have to prioritize because, for example, you have 1 million manuscripts on Bhagavad Gita, which is already published. So that may not be of much use, though the content is since the content is already extracted. So it's very important to prioritize these manuscripts which need to be digitized, which need to be deciphered, and then which need to be translated, and then also practical experiments have to be conducted to see how and if the information is true and can be practiced, and it can be also, we can scale up the techniques that are mentioned there. So in this context, as I mentioned, in the context of this conference, understanding the various complex scripts, it's called Brahmi, Grantha, Sharada, Nandinagari, Tigalari, Nevari, etc. So we have 84 different complex scripts have been identified in which these palm leaf manuscripts have been written. So that is the first step in deciphering these manuscripts. Second is understanding the complexities of each of these scripts. So though there might be 10,000 manuscripts written in Grantha script, a unique and very exotic script, not all these scripts are written in the same way, because these are all individual writers, and no two handwritings will be the same, as we all know from the point of science. So they say it's a signature. So each person's signature is different, even if they're so you have 8 billion people on the earth, and each person's signature will be different. Similarly, each of the writings of Grantha script or Sharda script will differ from one another. So it becomes all the more challenging to write a program that can actually understand and identify these complexities, etc. So that is why, as I have mentioned, Grantha script itself is of several types, based on because it was the common script used in the entire South India before the other scripts emanated like Telugu, Malayalam, etc. So Tamil Nadu Grantha script is different from Karnataka Grantha script, which is different from Andhra Grantha script. Then the most, as I mentioned just now, each writer of Grantha has his own style of writing. It is very difficult to make out unless you have techniques of pattern recognition, etc. And you recognize the patterns in a few folios, as we call them. Each palm leaf is called a folio in manuscript jargon. And then you can ask the machine to replicate the same identification process, etc. And then finally, evolving manual solutions for the above steps before you can replicate it in a machine. So first, it is very important for human beings to understand what is the content or how to analyze it, because then only machine learning can be implemented. I may be corrected if I'm wrong, because I'm not a technical person. So it involves understanding the techniques used by the individual writer, acclimatizing to the various markers. This is very, very important, because in palm leaf manuscripts, you don't have any punctuation marks like full stops, commas, chapter endings, etc. So it's a big challenge. And one more important thing is, when a writer used to write on a palm leaf, and a scribe, as we call him, the person who used to engrave it on the manuscripts, when the scribe writes, he will not be able to strike off something if he writes something wrong. So each scribe has his own technique of indicating how the previous alphabet that is written should not be taken into account. So sometimes you find an inverted letter of the previous letter that is written there. So you have to understand that the previous letter should not be taken into account. Then within the text also you have markers. For example, in the Brahma Sutras, when a particular sub-chapter has to end, so they used to repeat the last word. So when the same word is repeated twice, it means the sub-chapter is in. So these are all text markers available that are used to interpret the text of the manuscript. And suppose the entire topic is going to end, the final sutra will be repeated twice. That is the final sutra of the Brahma Sutras. So it says, Sutra Abhyasaha Shastra Parisamaptim Jyotayi. Since this sutra is repeated twice, it means that the entire book has come to end. So each writer uses his own type of marker to convey some information that is very important as far as the identification of the text and also topic is concerned. And one more thing that I would like to add before I complete is that the person who deciphers the manuscript may not be a domain expert. So domain expertise is very important for if we have to actually identify, interpret, and then understand what is mentioned in the manuscript. So it is not just a script expert deciphering the script. So the person who knows the script also has to be a domain expert, or there has to be a combination of a domain expert and script expert sitting together and then making out what is being written or what has been written. So these are the most important steps as far as recognizing the text that is written in these exotic palm leaf manuscripts is to be done. And finally, I would like to add one more aspect and then conclude my presentation. Recently, we had a team from National Geographic Channel who had come to see these manuscripts. And it flashed to me and I mentioned it and it was very much appreciated. So today, the CDs that have been written 5 years ago don't work because you don't have CD drives. And the floppies are long extinct now. So we may only remember that they existed. And the current generation may not even know what floppy disks are. So when you see, then you had magnetic tapes and several other media, which have not survived for more than 5 or 10 years. These palm leaf manuscripts have survived for more than 800 years. So from a different perspective, when you see it, so though they are very, very primitive, they have stood the test of time. And we can see how our forefathers, our ancient Indians, were experts in having foresight that these scripts have been preserved for more than 700 to 800 years. So that way, even though the technique might be primitive, it has stood the test of time, and they can survive for more than another 500 to 600 years. In fact, there are several other aspects that are involved. For example, we have paper manuscripts. And in Ahmedabad, in an institution today, they are manufacturing inks with organic materials, which they say can survive for 1,000 years. Of course, we may not be able to prove that fact today, but these techniques that are time tested have stood the test of time. They have stood the test of the vagaries of nature, and that from that point of view also, we have to appreciate these techniques and preserve them and propagate them for posterity. Thank you very much.
Great. That's a tremendous amount of domain knowledge right there. So I would also like to request Dr. P. Ramanujan and Dr. G.P. Prasad, who are online, to share their comments. I hope they can just unmute and provide their comments.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi Kiran. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So on this issue, anyway, of course, I have been working on a totally different domain. And this is specifically okay. Can I go ahead with sharing my screen?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So. Screen yeah. Thank you. Screen. Yeah. Is the screen visible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So this is the institution currently where I have been doing my research, Parankasachar Institute of Vedic Studies. And of course, we have quite a few collection of manuscripts in different scripts, as we mentioned, but these are all related to a particular domain, that is Vedic texts in specific. That is, Vedic texts are Vedas, of course, different varieties, different branches of them. They have additional information compared to the normal manuscript. This is about the phonetic information. That is, how does somebody intonate the accent, the stress on the words. And this extra information is encoded with some special symbols. There may be lines above, below, along, etc., numbers used, alphabets used, etc. These are to, apart from the content, they also tell you how they should be pronounced. And this area is important for those who are interested in the speech processing. And of course, I will also like to mention one major issue here. Language in India is referring to speech. Language equals to speech in India. We call it as bhasha, boli, mori, whatever. In every language, when you refer to a language, we refer to speech and not just text. Language is not equal to text. Language is equal to speech. Now, speech has got the intonation inbuilt into it. This is natural because this is a person sharing his experiences, and so the expressions do carry beyond just the characters, words, or sentences. They also carry emotions or the sentiments behind. And hence, the Vedic texts happen to be the sole repository available in writing today with a special scheme meant only for conveying the phonetic information besides the lexical information. There are characters, no doubt, but how is a character to be pronounced? And if there is a change in the pronunciation pattern, meaning changes, the effect changes. Because of this reason, Vedas are even to this day considered as the source of perfect pronunciation or speech, where the meaning would not change, even if a person does not know what it means. So long as you produce the same kind of sound with the same pitch, amplitude, etc., then the meaning would be conveying exactly the same the original person talked about it. So we have tried to, even in CDAC, this was one of the areas of my special activity, and we had built certain software solutions for the manuscripts to be understood, plus analyzing the Vedic text also, so that the information contained in the markers meant for the accentuation we were also considered. And of course, this also started from the standard itself. We built the ISKI standard in the year 1991, IS 13194, which includes an annex, it's Annex G, about these accent markers. And this is part of the Indian standard. Today, of course, Unicode also has included this as a special code page. It's important to see that this is some extra information that is available about the meaning through a well-organized set of symbols. There could be, as I mentioned, alphabets, numerals, symbols, etc. And different Vedas have different way. In fact, Samaveda has got the most elaborate variety of the intonation changes. And within that, different branches have different systems. There are unique additional characters and accents are the stress markers. And one of the motivation for the study and preservation of the Indic manuscripts could be those who can, those who are aware or those who can afford. These branches have so much of information about creation, the cosmic details, philosophy, and right down to the mundane items, like let us say, how does a plant grow? And if it is also used along with a mantra and without, what are the differences? These kind of details are available. So this is one of the reasons for the choosing of this field. Of course, there are very, very few experts, but no doubt we have a large number of hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on Vedas, and Vedas also have many more texts related to them called Vedangas, Upangas, Veda Lakshanas, Veda Bhashyas, etc. Now we are trying to see, the last more than 25 years, we have been working on these kind of the cultural aspects again, because they relate to community knowledge, practices carried on over millennia. And in the oral tradition, this was actually communicated. There are, of course, localized variations, and these are best captured in the manuscripts of the relevant times. And they throw ample light on the heritage, language, culture, dialects, practices, traditional values, ethics, morals, etc. Of course, present generation is sadly cut off from these invaluable treasures. But if you could afford to go back to the roots, probably we could revive or propagate them. And these are, of course, containing time-tested and universal solutions to the problems that humanity faces, and even today they are relevant. And I would also add one more feature. They help generate pride in one's own identity, lineage, uniqueness, and excellence in multiple fields historically. So I am only trying to work on, though it's a very vast subject. We have been choosing two items. One is the Vedas and Shastra. The second one is among the philosophy, because Ramanujacharya, he propagated Vishishtadvaita Vedanta. And this Sampradaya has a combination of Sanskrit text and Tamil text by Alvars, the saints, which cover the philosophy together. So we have been working on these two areas, and I have a few samples when later we get an opportunity, I'll just try to show them. So for this point, I think I would stop here.
Thank you. So I would also ask Dr. G.P. Prasad to share his comments before we move on to the next theme.
Namaste to all. First of all, I would like to say about myself. Actually, I'm not having that much Sanskrit background or linguistic expertise. So mainly I'm a Ayurvedic specialist. I did my MD and PhD in Ayurveda. As head of the institute, and I worked in this National Institute of Indian Medical Heritage, and I did a digitization project. I come across with so many Ayurvedic manuscripts, which includes palm leaf, paper manuscripts, even so many stone inscriptions.
Dr. Prasad, we cannot hear you.
Hello?
Yes,
Ah.
yeah. Please go ahead.
Actually, I didn't have background of Sanskrit. I'm an Ayurvedic graduate and postgraduate, and I did my PhD also in Ayurveda. So in this institute, we digitized so many Ayurvedic manuscripts from all over South India, Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. So we come across with many Ayurvedic palm leaf manuscripts, paper manuscripts. Even we are doing research on medical inscriptions also. As Alvar sir has rightly pointed out, there are so many inscriptions. So now we are finding scarcity, or even I can say very little people can understand the scripts, can understand the inscriptions, and even to take the estampage also. So earlier we used to take the estampages of medical inscriptions. Later we used to transliterate and translate it. So we find so many medical inscriptions in which we find that some of the physicians, some of the surgeons were there. They served the people, and kings have supported the physicians. Even if you see Fanagiri inscription, there it was mentioned that the Raj, what you call that Raja Vaidya has been given the honor to erect a pillar, which is called as Dharma Chakra. So in the same way, if you see the Agalaya inscription, it is in Kannada and mixed Telugu inscription. There it was mentioned that Agalaya was a famous surgeon. He has been given so many honorific names, and so many physicians used to come over there to visit his place, and whatever doubts they are having in Ayurveda, all those doubts were clarified by that person. Being a famous surgeon, the chronic diseases were also treated by that surgeon. So if you go see Tirumukdal inscription, so many things have been mentioned. How many there was a physician, there was a surgeon, there was a treatment procedures, there were so many herbs have been mentioned. So all these were mentioned in the inscription. So in olden days, people are ready to come over there. There are people who are having eminent knowledge to decode those inscriptions. Now we are having that scarcity. What Sir has also told, So first of all, we should, in my opinion, first of all, we should identify the people. We should have a group, because the recent generation is not having that skill to decipher what have been mentioned even in palm leaf manuscripts also. So if you see many Ayurvedic palm leaf manuscripts also, that cursive writing in Telugu, which were called as Golusu writing. So very few people can read those palm leaf manuscripts also. So if even one single formulation we are missing in that manuscript, that is missed forever. Later, if it is worm eaten, or if we are not maintaining that palm leaf manuscript, then it is lost for the coming generations. So we should feel that seriousness also. So with these techniques, if we can able to digitize, if we can able to decipher the things today itself, if we can attract the next generation. So once this machine learning or whatever Ravikiran is trying, if it is possible, then the people will get inclination, or they will get interest in reading these manuscripts, in deciphering these things, in transliterating, later translation. All these things can be taken up. So from medical point of view, Alvar sir has rightly told, each and every manuscript, some manuscripts are there like Charaka, Susruta, already we have already translated. So even in medical fields also, some rare unpublished manuscripts are available. Many manuscripts they have mentioned as Vaidya, which are mainly based on the individual physician's own experiences. So there might be some new herbs, there might be some new formulations, which can be useful to the common public also. So there is a huge data, huge manuscript repositories all over India. So all these things should be deciphered. All these, there are so many medical inscriptions also, which we are doing work on that, but still we have to what you call, we have to make extra pages of many more medical inscriptions. So in the inscriptions, whether there is the medical data to identify that also we need rigorous studies also. So I feel this is the right time and we are in the right direction. But there are so many doubts for us also, even for the audience also, how far we can be successful, or what precautions we have to take. As sir has pointed out rightly, each and every scribe will write in his own passion, in his own style. So first of all, whether is it possible to identify each and every letter? So for that also we need the experts. We need the experts and their help. So initially we can make the machines learn all these things. That will be very grateful. And later the people will come forward, and institutions will come forward, and even Minister of Ayush, from Minister of Ayush also, we feel that there will be support from Minister of Ayush in conducting workshops or in doing some laborious work. Thank you, sir. With this background, I would like to move forward.
Yeah, thank you. So just to move things to the next level. So we have been discussing about sourcing and the issues that are involved, or things that one must appreciate regarding annotation or transcription. Now, as with any theme or any topic, when it comes to digitization or annotation, there are many things one must consider. One must consider the language, one must consider scripts, one must consider standards. Many of you here in the audience might be familiar with the text encoding initiative, which has sought to set standards to for interoperability and many other advantages. Particularly coming to manuscripts, there is an aspect of geometry given the unstructured nature of these documents. Therefore, it is important to identify salient regions within these documents, lines, pictures, and other markers, and so on. And naturally, as the domain experts who have just mentioned, there is an absolute indispensable need for domain experts. Without them, we cannot even get off the ground. And in this respect, given that this conference is about technology and handwriting, there is a need for tools. So I would just like to mention a tool which was presented at the workshop on open services and tools for document analysis. So these are digitized documents, and hopefully by looking at this process, so we wish to solve the problem at a superficial level of just trying to understand the content of the document in 2 steps. So firstly, we would like to isolate individual lines, text lines, and after that, tackle the problem of what we call OCR. And one look at this document, especially for those who work on historical manuscripts, I hope they will appreciate this. So this process is laborious. There is no second way about it. So for example, just to annotate a single line, it has taken nearly 30 seconds. Now, imagine the scale or the magnitude of this problem if we wanted to solve this. We wanted to simply determine where the lines are. Now, a lazy attempt at doing this might be to just draw a box, but given the importance of diacritics and various markers, doing so would incur a lot of errors. That plus the unstructured nature of these documents just magnifies the problem even more. We are just adding noise to processes that will look at these lines downstream. So next, let us also consider the challenges in machine-based understanding of manuscripts. So as I mentioned before, we are talking about understanding text, that is true, but there are also associated problems of identifying figures, of tables. Often these manuscripts contain tables, and many other document attributes. Writer identity, the age, the script, the language. There are many local and global attributes for these documents, which may be important to identify before further processing can happen. So in this respect, we did what, when surmounted with any difficult problem most people do, the problem of divide and conquer. So we figured out that it was easier to get annotations for lines than it was to gain access to domain experts. So therefore, annotators might not understand the language or the scripts, but any layman annotator would easily understand what a line of text is. So we went ahead with that, and we produced 2 deep networks for segmenting lines and other regions in manuscripts, which were presented at the previous 2 editions of ICFHR. And these are some of the outputs. So hopefully you can also see the dimensions of these manuscripts. So that is in pixels. And here is an example of this system in action. So this is integrated into a web-based tool, which acquires a manuscript and subsequently produces lines on them. So this is a cloud-based system for segmenting lines in a manuscript. So you can see that along with lines, it also tries to segment other portions, for example, page boundaries, so that you can restrict your processing to certain portions of the text and not all along. And these are some of the documents. So just to give you an idea, this is a document which contains multiple regions. There's a picture, there's a boundary line, there are character line segments, character components, page boundary, and so on. Now, we may be interested just in text, but it turns out that knowing what is not text is equally important and often helps the task that we are really interested in. So taking a myopic view that I'm going to annotate only text often gives subpar results. That's been our experience. Another example. So I'm just going to go through this gallery of images so that you can appreciate the challenge and the variety of documents that are present. So you can see some examples with damage. Often there are library markers which are added by, say, the curators. So one of these leaves in this case is from the excellent library at University of Pennsylvania, which houses some of these manuscripts in their digitized forms. So not all content on a manuscript is from its original source. Often you have lines which are written in varying orientations. So in this case, you have lines at the edges of the manuscript. So it's what people do when they have a budget on the writing space, right? I'm sure everybody has experienced this at one point or another. You have a single page on which you have to write everything, possibly during writing exams, and you end up doing what possibly this writer was of a similar bent of mind. And as far as model building is concerned, there are different aspects which come into the picture: compute, training, evaluation. So I would like to ask Dr. Christopher and to some extent, and following that, maybe Dr. Mukul to share their ideas and thoughts on this problem.
Thank you. So I'm very happy to be invited to this panel because I didn't know anything about Palm Leaf 1 week ago. So I had to learn to do a crash course on Palm Leaf before coming here. So what I see is that finally, if you compare to what happened in Western Europe for handwriting, it would mean that we would consider recognizing to draw a parallel between Palm Leaves and manuscripts in Western Europe. It would mean for us that we would consider recognizing all the manuscripts in any language in Europe, in any topics, and seeing that as one domain, which is not true. In fact, in Europe, we are specialized in, I would say, like, let's say, manuscript in Latin or manuscript in other languages. So I think it's important to see that the diversity that you have in Palm Leaf manuscripts is also exists in other domains, and maybe the strategy could be the same, either to split the domain in subtopics. One thing important, I think, about annotation is that it is the same problem with medieval manuscript, for example. You don't have a lot of experts to annotate them. So I think what is important is not to use them to do simple tasks like text line detection. And I would go into, you know, the thing that I've shown this morning, that what you want is just the expert to give the final result of what they want. That would be transcription of the Palm Leaves, but not drawing the lines and not drawing zones and things like this. So we need to be able to train the model from the final results and not from intermediate results. Maybe one thing also about the multilingual aspect. So you stress that you have many languages, you have many particularities in the scripts. And in fact, in Europe, we can see that this is the same if you consider all the languages. And in the project that we've done on medieval manuscript, we as we did for the project I've presented this morning, we always start with a single model. So even though we have in our corpus Latin, French, German, Old Czech, and Spanish, we start with one model and see if it works. And usually, while the model is not that bad compared to a very specific model, because you have more data to train the model. So if you collect all the data in all the languages, you have something which doesn't mean anything for our linguists, because you have a model that is able to recognize both French and Old Czech, and they are not at all the same language. But so it doesn't mean anything from a linguistic point of view, but from a transcription point of view, it's better because you have more data to train the model. So that could be also one approach, instead of saying, okay, this is too complex, we need to focus on annotating each language individually and train a model. We could also gather, I think, training data to have something, a model which is trained on more data. So that's the thought I had about this domain.
Great. Dr. Sinha.
Sorry, just to first introduce me that I am not from image processing and also I am not from Sanskrit or any historical background. I'm more an engineer all the time. But my interaction has become with all this cultural thing while I was a consultant to Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts. And there, when I'm getting, like here, Professor Albert told also that there are 145 collections, okay? Each one tells, quote unquote, information about their collection, their stories, okay? As an engineer, I was only trying to stress, which is I'm still stressing, make it universally accessible to it, bring it somewhere, okay? Otherwise, each has a specificity or a specific characteristics and all those things. And you as a developer of OCR or developer of various kind of document analysis tools will take one thing. But my stress has been all the time from IGNC, I was from 1995 associated now. National Manuscript Mission also, which started around 20 years back, I'm indirectly associated because that mission has come under IGNC. And all the places I have always tried to bring all this information, at least on the web, make it accessible, okay, like that. At least after NMM, National Manuscript Mission coming, okay, they could at least access out of the 30 million, around 10 million being under their access. And putting forth or pushing them, I will not use the word putting them, pushing them out of that around 4.5 million manuscripts are all at present available on their web. Okay. Which they are not giving universal access that way, but you can always get through that. Number one. There are remaining around 5.5 million has not been brought. But if I take all 145 collections, that might be 30 billion or something. I just don't know how. Okay. So I am looking always that first make all this accessible. When those things were accessible, I requested the juniors to do some processing from that. So now let me tell you a few other things which all these Sanskrit experts know. The Sanskrit manuscript are written in 22 different scripts. You might not be knowing. It is written in Devanagari. Next is highest Oriya. Okay. Oriya script. Third highest is Malayalam. And like that. Okay. So as you showed also that. So now it is not only that I know Malayalam, and as Professor Albert told also, if I have to read Sanskrit written in Malayalam, okay, I don't know how many people can do it. Because earlier it's a Malayalam script, so you should really bring it in Malayalam at least, transcribe into or at least OCR or whatever it is. And then later on do transliteration on at least one base script. Just to do my Sanskrit, I take the Devanagari as the base script. So all these 22 different type of manuscripts of Sanskrit can be at least compared. So whether the content is concerned, I always listen different people telling slightly varying content. Even Ramayana, okay, for which critical edition has been made by MS University some early 60s or late 50s. Okay, they had covered 86 manuscripts, different in different languages. You should also know that oldest manuscript in palm leaves, kind of thing, is only of 11th century, and that is in Newari. Newari script is Nepal area. Many of people know it, okay, like that. So if I look from reverse back to why I have motivation for this palm leaves, our all cultural and other knowledge, as Professor Albert told you, so many that are there in the manuscript, these palm leaves. And earlier, whatsoever, since it was the oral tradition in India or Indian subcontinent, including the Southeast. And as Professor Ramanujan was saying, because their script is not only keeping about the sound aspect, but how to be recited and all those kind of things there in those scripts. So only the Brahmi has been quote unquote put in the Unicode. Nothing has been done about Grantha. I just don't know about it. You can update me. So I'm just telling that from engineering angle, I try to push all Unicode kind of thing earlier, kind of. Later on, when many center got some fund from the different government, state government, they always kept their data not on the website. But again, as Professor was saying, that it's on floppy disk or tape, which is just not accessible to you. It's all totally gone. Okay. And that was in IGNCA when I was there. I was the first to push that. To think in long-term digital preservation, because this standard will keep changing, medium will keep changing, and you just can't be sure next 5 years what would be the standard and all that. Okay. And that's why also I am in the long-term digital preservation. And I can't keep on telling all people the best way will be digitize these things, but I'm using the word digitize in a looser sense. Okay. And making it available on the web. Okay. It might be whatsoever is your rights, another thing I'm not. And then for each, there is another important thing in the manuscript you will find. Same Ramayana, if it is written in X and written Y, there are many places different. Okay. So up till now, all the cultural thing which we all talk about it, kind of thing, there are only two critical editions, either of Ramayana, which turns out of 86, or of Mahabharata, only one segment. Professor Suktantar has done it. And he did it as an individual passion of Oriental Research Institute and Bhandarkar Research Institute in Pune. So I'm just saying that these are the things, and every time we say we need this kind of thing, which is very natural thing. But basically, first make it available. Okay. Then only all of you people who are developing different things, this line segmentation and all those kind of things, that can be done if it is available. Whether anybody gives you permission or not, if it is available, you can always join. So why I'm just bringing these issues here, okay, very consciously, like this, in India, the biggest problem, apart from various people are holding this repository, and is not easily accessible to other people unless you visit there, request them like that. And the second important problem is that the department here also, government department, whether it's state department, like cultural, Department of Culture is different. If the funding goes to Department of Culture, all the people in the culture side only will get the zone. They can't have connection with Department of IT or Department of TSP. So these are the problems keep happening. Okay. So to you people also, I will suggest that you have to, you people as academic, okay, because I have been also parallelly academic. Academic has at least extra respect. Okay. So if you get from any side fund, try to cooperate with the other side. Okay. So I'm just saying that this sources, apart from first thing I was trying to say about sources. Second thing, what is the motivation? I was making it universally accessible. Okay. All the just Christopher is saying the first time knowing about it. It's all huge amount of things is available of national manuscript vision, but it is not openly available. Okay, like that. So anyway, I just don't know how to. I'm always external person, neither in academic nor in the government, okay, nor in politics. Okay, but here all three works. If they are coordinating, then it's only it can happen. Okay, and when he also told me there are so many types of knowledge extraction. He told about Ayurveda. I know myself just which is the minimum manuscript. Again, inquired from Indira Gandhi National Center for Art. They told Natya Shastra is the minimum set of manuscripts, and Natya Shastra is the oldest in India. There are only 48 manuscripts. But critical edition of that Natya Shastra is also not waiting. Okay? So just like as you told about yoga, how many manuscripts are of yoga? I don't think you will get some data. But then out of that, yoga in manuscript 1 and yoga in manuscript 2 will be very different. Because all manuscripts here were written about copying kind of thing. Okay? And when you are copying, there is always some noise enters, something you lose it, something like that. Okay? So which is authentic and how you make it authentic, which is these people call it the critical edition kind of thing. They refer all this thing, they say perhaps this is interesting, perhaps this is interesting kind of thing. So I'm just saying all this is not only just cultural heritage, it is a knowledge heritage. Problem is that it is not somehow becoming a universal access kind of thing. And once it is universal access kind of thing, then you will realize what are the different problems. Okay? I mean, you are looking at that problems of one side, which is visible to you. But I'm just telling you, written in Sanskrit, written in Malayalam, Sanskrit, written in Oriya, what will you do out of it? Your OCR is a Malayalam OCR or is a Sanskrit OCR? Okay, the language model is of Sanskrit or script model, I don't just know the OCR. So these are the various different type of questions coming. And I'm only telling, bringing it slightly one level up. Okay, and telling you that you think in that way and cooperate somehow. You are not cooperating somehow. You can go very, very deep into your field. They can go deep into it, but we are not feeling. We are really feeling put a report. Not that convenient.
Right.
Okay.
So
if you are very, so I've diverted kind of your discussion. Sorry for it. But that's, I feel, most important thing for India. Okay.
So in this respect, I would like to actually ask Dr. Christopher about the dynamics of these things. I mean, we tend to think of these problems as one purely of technology, right? Magically, a source of manuscripts descends from somewhere, and then our brains start to tick. But often there are dynamics related to reaching out to agencies and securing access to them, and annotation, which we all know is non-trivial. So how can you share some comments on how it works, maybe in some of the institutions of Europe or agencies that you're working with?
Yeah, that's true that usually the dynamics come from the institution that own the manuscript at the beginning. And in fact, they know that they have to do something about them to digitize them. But most of the time, they don't know exactly what's the purpose of it. So they know, okay, well, let's convert them into images. But then what for? If they just go one step, so taking the manuscript, converting it to images, and store the image, maybe putting available on the web, but that's not really taking value of it. So you need to cooperate with people who are able to extract the data, like what we do, to show to tell them and to show them what they could do with what we can extract. Usually that they don't know. And the first time we came with a transcription on a very large corpus of medieval manuscript in Old French from the Middle Age. So everyone was, the historian and paleographers, they were very, enthusiastic about the idea. So at the beginning of the project, we did the project, we produced the transcription, and then we said, okay, this is for you now. And then they were just, they didn't know what to do with it. So they didn't expect that it was possible to do it. So now they didn't even know, okay, what kind of problem I can solve now that I couldn't solve before, what question I can ask. So it's also something that they have to think about, like finding new ways of working with this data, with the manuscript, because just usually they were used to just take a couple of them, read them very carefully, transcribe them, and now they have access to thousands or millions of them. So it's a totally different perspective for them, and they're not prepared to do that. So that's something they have to.
So do you think there is possibly an element of first determining where their true needs are? So superficially seen, it looks like saving time from manual transcription seems to be a good use case. Right? You are saving labor for people whose time could be spent fruitfully elsewhere, rather than just sit and painfully write them by hand. But I guess what you're saying is that sometimes that's not what they are really after. The problems lie elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, you really need to define what is the problem you want to solve from a social science or humanist point of view, like what kind of social question you want to ask. And you don't really need to, for example, transcribe everything in the manuscript if you want to study one particular aspect, for example. And if you want to do statistics about a large corpus, you don't need a very high quality of transcription. Maybe you can deal with errors. And that's something which is very difficult for historians or paleographers to work on something that they know contains errors. And they're not used to that. And it's difficult for them to imagine what they can do with erroneous transcription. And that's what we call a point of a working point. So you have to discuss with these people to say, okay, we can produce data for you with this level of error. What are you ready to accept as something that you can use, and how you can use the data? Maybe not everything will be transcribed, but only a part of it. Maybe you will only have, I don't know, everything but what is in the table, and are you able to work with this and find a working point between the historian and what's produced by computer scientists?
Great. So at this point, I would like to go back to the domain experts, starting with Dr. Alvar. So just taking from Dr. Christopher's question, so to use a loose parlance, what is the minimum viable product that would be of interest? Of course, there is the problem of OCR itself, but as your previous description shows, there are multiple dimensions. Right? So the idea of writer, so all of this is very complex. And if we wanted to solve the problem at first level, would it be the dimension of script? Would it be the dimension of language? Would it be something else?
So we would like to start with the scripts. And like you mentioned, we do pattern recognition to maximum possible extent. And we standardize the scripts and get the machine to do deciphering. So if deciphering is done at least up till, like you mentioned, about 80% accuracy, 90% accuracy, that will be of great help. So then we can, and as Dr. Sinha was just mentioning, it would be of great help if the NMM and IGNCA could put the entire manuscript collection online. So it can be available in the public domain and people can draw from it and start deciphering them one by one. Then it should be a consortium of institutions doing this work. In fact, as I just wanted to mention in response to Dr. Sinha's words, now the DST, or Department of Science and Technology, has started a SHRI program, Science Heritage Research Initiative. And we are also one of the beneficiaries of the program, under which we are doing a lot of work with regard to manuscripts on science and technology specifically. And there are several other gaps, like Dr. Sinha was just mentioning. You don't have thematic catalogs as of today. That is to do with manuscript related. As far as the IIIT and also the handwriting recognition aspects are concerned, we would like to have a very robust, foolproof solution that can immediately decipher the manuscript. Don't worry about the domain in the initial stages. Only just worry about the script, decipher it into whatever script is there, and make it translatable. Of course, now if you do it, there is a website called Aksharamukha, which translates from 80 different scripts. Any script can be the target script, and all the others, source script, and all the others can be the target scripts. So transliteration problem is solved. So once if we can convert it into a Unicode text, then that will be a very great help that can be done to manuscript all this, who can decipher the manuscripts and then take it forward.
So I also heard in my interactions with people from who are involved in preserving manuscripts, one suggestion was to restrict to a domain because at least within a domain, there is a limited set of topics, themes, and vocabulary that is involved. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that's, to start off, it's okay. But once you identify if the manuscripts are a rare manuscript, as we call it, Because as I said, the Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, there are millions of manuscripts. They don't make any difference unless you want to prepare a critical edition. Today, it may not be of very great significance. So you have to first identify which are the most valuable manuscripts, then digitize them. And for those, we require the whatever OCR or whatever solution you are giving. So we have to prioritize these manuscripts and then don't limit to a particular domain because there is not much time left. So we request the technologists to help with the solution that make an OCR kind of a thing and convert all the text that is available in the manuscripts into the machine readable form. That will be one of the greatest contributions that will actually play a strategic role in deciphering the information available in the manuscripts.
Great. So I would also like to ask the online panelists to share their comments as well. Dr. Prasad.
I also agree, sir. Even now, many medical books are also not having critical editions. Even that Charaka critical edition was also published in abroad. We didn't have that. We have not done that one also. So if we are having any other manuscript, we can compare it and we can have a critical edition. Some missing chapters, some missing topics may be included, or some formulations may be modified based on these critical editions. So we will get more knowledge. And Sir has also rightly pointed out, we should not restrict it to, initially it may be correct. Once if we can involve in many topics, then we can have more database. And even machine can also learn more patterns also. So then it will be more useful. In my point of view also, the same thing, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Ramanujan.
See, my view is basically, how do you know which is the domain in which the palm leaf is having content? First of all, we are having problem of experts. So the expertise, once it is quite scarce, it is good to see whatever you lay your hands on, see that if it can be converted into a readable text. That is, for the moment, we just don't worry about what it is concerned with. That will be known only later, and that will be known by maybe a little deeper study. Even today, I was just hearing this, Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita are there in number of editions. Manuscript, whether it contains this or not, also has to be known by somebody. And he should at least know Ramayana or Gita. Otherwise, he will not even be able to know this is Ramayana or Gita. The whole issue is about expertise is lacking when we say. The main issue is about the scripts to be handled. Like Dr. Mukul Sinha very rightly pointed out, Sanskrit is written. I have 35 different manuscripts of the same text, and I produced a publication just through the palm leaf editor that we wrote in CDAC. The whole point is to see, I knew the text, and I also knew maybe 7 or 8 different scripts in which they were written, and so it was possible. It's not that easy. Yes, as a strategy, if somebody knows a priori, yes, then you can try to prioritize. That itself is not the case in many of the bundles. So you get bundles containing many texts in the single bundle. There are many such cases. One bundle, if you take out in a manuscript library, it may have 8-10 texts within that. And there is no very clear marking. In fact, cataloging is the problem there, unless someone has listed out. In fact, you rightly pointed out, the University of Pennsylvania had done a wonderful job where someone had written every folio, front side, back side, where does it begin with, what is the content, etc. If that much of painstaking work is done alone, someone will be able to say, this bundle is a single text. I have many bundles with me having multiple texts within the same bundle. They are, strung together, tied together, but that does not mean it is a single book. So it's not really so important to initially worry about what is it dealing with. As long as we are able to at least see, the content can be seen in some common way, like the transliteration facility that we have today. So I think Dr. Alvas were very right. If we have a Unicode content, that makes it quite simple to at least, get the right person to look at it, what it is, what language, what text. See, sometimes it does not even make it easy to figure out. Maybe Sanskrit, but if the field is not known, one may not be able to segment it to words even. Many times it is difficult to say where the first word ends or the second word begins. And as I also pointed out, there is no punctuation, there is no special tools. So where does somebody stop? Where does somebody think? So it is good to at least see. I also want to mention, like what Mukul Sinha mentioned, manuscript should be available in public. Similarly, also the computational efforts should also be available to people. See, I saw some cloud-based annotating tool shown on the screen. Do I have access to that? No, this is also important to see both sides. If they extend their cooperative hand, then things will go faster. You develop a program, you want to improve that, you need a feedback, you need actual, practical utility of it. Then someone should be allowed to use it freely. There again, see, there could be similar problems. I don't know, IPR, whatever, any issue. But this is actually also impeding at times to at least see what it is kind of. I have many contents with me. I would like to see if there is a good tool which will tell me, okay, I segment it to lines or make it to different areas. Then the next step, of course, is, okay, I know, let's say 7, 8 scripts. Let me at least put in my expertise to at least see, okay, what letters are there. Now, OCR can be greatly helped if you do have a full set of contents as characters. If you just have individual characters even, then of course, what language could it be, what domain it could be. Unless they are cataloged, it is not easy. Given an unknown bundle in the hand to an expert, not easy to say a priori whether it is a single text, what is the language, what is the subject, etc. So the best strategy would be even through crowdfunding, let us say crowdsourcing. If someone could still do this voluntarily also, if people can have that mindset to share for collaborative improvement, that will really help. And then it does not matter whether you restrict it to your domain. And domain choice also is difficult, is what I am wanting to point out. Not easy to know before what domain it is pertaining to, unless it is cataloged and properly done. Yeah.
Thank you for your points, Dr. Ramanujan. So with that, we come to the end of the panel discussion. So when we started out, we first looked at some of the comments from the domain experts on the motivation to study them. And for technology, there is a myopic view that you are solving an OCR problem, but really what you're solving is much larger than that and much more profound than that, which sometimes we know only in hindsight. So thanks for bringing those perspectives, Dr. Alwar and Dr. Ramanujan and Dr. Prasad. And from the technology angle, there are also challenges, but there are also opportunities, things that technology brings to the table. And just as we heard from Dr. Ramanujan, there is a requirement for a certain level of cooperation. And the hope is that with this dialogue, we can continue it offline and take the next positive steps. Right? So with that, we conclude. So thank you for being the set of speakers who patiently listened to this panel discussion. And before we end, a small token of appreciation to our panel members. Dr. Venu. Dr. Alwar. Dr. Christopher. Dr. Sinha. So thank you once again for those attending online as well as those present and the panelists. Yeah. So wish you all a very good evening, and for those attending the conference, see you all tomorrow.
Inform that tomorrow is a KMCA.
Yes. So a small announcement before we close. So tomorrow's venue will be the KMCA auditorium, which is one level below this floor. So make sure that you keep a note of the venue and not turn up in a class which might be happening here or an empty room. Thank you. Good evening.
That's only to the